Welcome to Actual Scale Modelling. This is part 9 of the Airfix Hellcat scale 1 to 24. In part 8 I placed in the ignition leads and some of the connecting pipes. In part 9 I'll be connecting all the pipes together and putting on the framework to hold the engine. So let's get into this. So I've discovered that these pipes that I'm placing are really quite difficult to place in. It gets very cramped inside this engine, and it may take a while for you to figure out how they go in. If you haven't lined everything up properly, and I didn't, by the way, you will struggle to get them into the connection points. The best way to deal with that is either gently push things out the way or modify the pipe itself. And by that, what I mean is when you make up the pipe, let's say this one I'm putting in here, it gets connected onto the other one, so it ends up in a Y branch. But when you place it inside, it may not reach the connection point. So you may have to snip off the end of it, and that's what I did. But be careful if you do that, because you've still got to make it look like that it's connecting to the actual engine itself. So if you bury it a little bit the way it's meant to go and point it up towards the connection point, you should get away with it, unless you can actually see that connection point. Then you're going to have to move things out of the way for it to attach. It's a little bit complicated, but it was a workaround that I had to do because, as I said, I didn't actually get everything lined up the way I should have done. So I will just zoom in here, and maybe you can see what I'm on about. So these are the two pipes that have been put together, and they go in here, and the connection is on the second part of the engine, not the first. They push right in, but it doesn't quite reach the second part for some reason. So that one I really had to push in for it to connect. On the other ones, it didn't reach because there was an item in the way. So I trimmed the pipe slightly. But these ones here are the more important ones. These ones will be actually lying onto the main unit cradle for holding it. And this is what I'm building now. And these are going to be painted, well, are painted in Tamiya's F6F-5 cockpit green. Now you can either paint them at this stage or wait until it's built. There's a little thing that goes on the bottom of it, some sort of box structure. I'm not sure what it's for, but these were painted in River Color 08 matte black. Now there's scope to paint in more detail on these, but I wasn't sure how they looked, and I didn't want to spoil it by putting too much detail in it. And then someone said, oh, but that engine part doesn't have the sort of colouring. So on this case, I went against my instincts really to add a little bit more detail to it and just left it black. The actual unit itself just gets pushed on at the top here. There's a big recess more for it to fit into. You shouldn't have any problems connecting it. Now this goes on the inside of this part, and the thing to note here is on the outside you're seeing that darker ring column. If you're building the engine to display separately, you wouldn't actually put this part on, you would put that ring on separate, which it tells you instructions to do. So if you follow the instructions, if you're doing it that way, you should be fine. But this just goes on to 3 location areas inside, just little knobs of plastic that push down to it. And then on the engine itself, the location points for these are easy to define. They are the bigger recess points around the engine, 4 or 5 of them. The only ones that haven't been connected to any pipes to place them on. Now it's important when you're placing this on for it to be a 90-degree angle. Don't be tempted to push it right in and have it slightly off just to get a connection. it should be at a 90-degree angle. Again, that is vitally important. The next part to be painted is a little canister in Italian red, 34 Revel aqua colour. Now the instructions say paint it the same colour, the green colour, the cockpit colour, but I decided to inject a little bit of colour into it just because I thought it would stand out better, and that sort of different coloration and doesn't make too much of a difference, I don't think. Next part is part of the air intake, and this little part here is just two halves put together, and then it goes into the gap that is on the main engine. Now I ran into a lot of trouble later on down the line on this, and I'm not sure whether I got it right or not, but at the moment I'm following the instructions that says put it in now, so that's what I did. And now it's time to make up the cradle that will hold the engine in place. So first of all, I'm putting on the little canister, and that just sits on the side of the actual framework of the cradle. So now it's time to fit the cradle. Alright, where I'm pointing with my tweezers there, there's a channel right in the centre, running around just that green collar that I placed in earlier on. It is a tight fit, but you should be okay to place them in. And once you place them cement in, they just slide in. It does actually help with the collar going around. It does help as a guidance to slip these in. The recess point for them is on a curve, is not as deep as you would think, so be careful that you do actually get them properly inside the recess area. You don't want them to go slightly out, because that will affect how the engine is fitted onto the main fuselage. So that's the main cradle. I'll just zoom in there for you to have a look. Everything is going okay for now, but it doesn't in the end. Next, I'm making up a series of little parts for the air intake system. There's quite a few to make up, but they're all very similar. They're just little parts cemented onto each other. Nothing of worth here. Just make sure that you follow the instructions. Some of them are difficult shapes, so just be mindful of that when you're fitting them. So dry fit them all the time, just to make sure you're putting them in the right way. On this one there's a little grey, and I painted that in Tamiya's X10 gunmetal. Now you don't necessarily have to paint this, you can barely see it when it's on, but it's part of the air intake and it's the grid for it. So I thought I would paint it just in case you can see it, but you really can't see much of it. So it's now time to build the air intake system onto the model. First of all, the main bracket goes onto the sidewall here. That went on without any problem. It just sits inside the carriage here. Next to go on was the collar, not the collar, the other air intake. I moved the collar out of the way just to make it easier for the next air intake piece to go on, and that goes on the part that was connected to the main engine. And this is where I started having problems. As you can see here, it was very difficult to fit with the cradle brackets in place. The instructions said that do it this way, but I just could not get it to fit properly. It looks alright there, but it was at a weird angle and it wasn't connecting to the actual main bracket itself. So in the end, what I had to do was take everything off. Luckily nothing had 100% yet, so I took everything off to fit this air intake. So I connected it to the part that goes onto the main engine. So I put those two parts together first of all. So if you look at the instructions there, it says that fits over the cradle, like so, and it tells you to put the cradle in first, but I just could not get it to fit, hence why I took everything off. So once that part was on, I placed it back in to the recess there, and it's got to line up with the bracket on top. And once that was in, I put in the brackets. Now, because I placed it on before placing the brackets in, you have to maneuver it and position it in a way through the brackets to get it in. It's a bit tricky. You actually may find it easier just to snip it in half, then glue it back together, and over the brackets. That'll work as well. Just make sure it's a clean cut and you won't have any problem. You may have to fill the line that you've snipped in a little bit, but that's a small price to pay for getting it to fit. So next is the side intake valves, and I had no problem with these whatsoever. The main pipe area fits onto the engine, and the main unit then goes onto the cradle like so. So next to go on to close up the intake, so these are two parts that go on at the side here. The smaller part of this unit fits onto the larger collar that I placed on earlier on, and they just click into position without any problems. Next there's another cylinder to be made up, and I painted this in Revit Aquacolor 99 aluminium. It was just a simple case of marrying the two halves together. For the cap, I painted it in 08 matte black by Revit Aquacolor. Nothing really necessary to do it, but I think it's nice to just to put in those finer little details. And once it's painted, there's a little bracket, but there's two brackets that go on each side for it to go into the cradle. Each one is a different size, so just make sure you place them in the right position on the right side, and then they just fit in over the cradle, well, the bracket there. They are location points, the recess points for it to fit in, so you shouldn't have too much difficulty finding the exact location. There's another piece that goes in front of the the cylinder thing here. Not sure what it's for. It's some sort of guard plate, I would imagine. But the legs for that just fit on the remaining recess points, the next to the canister. So again, it's a bit easy to fit, but just make sure of your location points for this. And the last thing to be fitted onto the engine is the main intake manifold here. There's just a couple of parts to it, nothing major. The inside though is painted in Revit Aquacolor 99 aluminium. Paint it before you put together, it's easier that way. And then the outside is painted in XF71 cockpit green. So once the inside paint is dry, it's just a case of putting it together as a simple process. Not much going on at all. And then it's dried, and I shall put on the bracket holding it. And that just sits in the little recess point there. So once that's done, and it's all ready to go, and it's just a simple case of pushing it onto the main engine block. Well, this will bring part 9 to a close. A bit of a problem stage for me at this one, but hopefully people will learn from my mistakes. In part 10, I'll be attaching the engine block to the actual fuselage, finish off a couple of little bits and pieces that get attached to it there. If you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the channel for the other builds for this particular log, and of course have a look at the channel for all my other builds. Subscribe to the channel as well for any updates, and hit that like button, and of course leave a comment. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.